Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. My name again is Jeffrey Davis, and we continue to stream stories of entrepreneurship, leadership, and how people are dealing with this economy. And to do that, we always need to understand the law, the trends in the law, and how it's affecting entrepreneurs. So we like to check in every week with Mark Furman, director and shareholder at Tarlow, Breed, Hart Rodgers, for our segment, Entrepreneurship and the Law. Welcome back, Mark.
Hi, Jeffrey. Very nice to see you.
You too, Mark. Look forward to it. Hope we get another 20 years.
Right. What I wanted to talk about today, Jeffrey, is that, a little unsolicited advice to business owners and entrepreneurs, which is understand your risks. Business owners, of course, have to make many decisions every day. And my suggestion is that you make them understanding what your risks are. So I have a few words of caution. First, don't assume you know what the law is, because the law is so complex and people keep changing the law. The legislators change the law. The law of the enforceability of covenants not to compete in Massachusetts was totally different 20 years ago than it is today. There are also fights about that area of the law nationally. So don't assume you know what the law is. Don't assume that you can have independent contractors, because that's another area of the law that's very complicated. And don't assume that you know what your insurance coverage is and what the gaps in the coverage are. The way to understand that is through taking the time and working with a experienced, knowledgeable insurance advisor. But one of the things you want to understand is what are the risks you're willing to self-insure or have your business self-insure. There are things that it certainly makes sense to self-insure. But you should understand where those gaps in coverage are. Consider whether you need these kinds of insurance. I mean, most companies have general liability insurance, but do you need directors and officers liability insurance? Do you need employment practices liability insurance? Is the amount of your insurance coverage adequate? Should you invest in an umbrella policy that will take over in the event your liabilities exceed that which is covered by your main insurance policy? More unsolicited advice, Jeff?
Yes, definitely.
Don't assume that just because you control the ownership of a business that you can do whatever you want. Don't assume that just because you own 100% of the voting rights in a company, don't assume you can do whatever you want vis-a-vis a non-voting minority owner or any minority owner, because there are legal restrictions on what you can do. And, we see cases where, controlling shareholders are accused of breaching their fiduciary duties, taking excess compensation, misdirecting business opportunities to themselves instead of the company. So be careful, get advice. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish and make decisions that are important without getting proper legal advice.
Well, I'd like to define what I'd like to put a framework around what you're saying, Mark, because I have a little bit of a marketing background, and I think you've defined things, and I'll make it in a marketing term. Most people who use attorneys use them in a reactive way. They wait till there's a problem and then they react to it, which is a very expensive process for using attorneys. I'm sure you don't complain about that, and it's a great way to make a living. But what you're really defining is a line in the sand, and that is doing proactive work with your attorney and with your professionals to prevent any of these problems from happening so that you don't get into a very litigious or difficult situation. So this is a list of proactive activities that an entrepreneur can do and plan with their attorney, with their advisors, to really stay out of trouble and make sure they can continue to navigate their business successfully with little risk. So I really draw that line in the sand.
Yes. So, I mean, I've had cases where actually people have bought so many businesses that they thought they could buy just another one, same industry themselves. So they put together the documents. It wasn't a huge transaction. And they didn't get legal advice, and it ended up being a horror show for them. And so if you think of accountants and business advisors, lawyers as an expense item, then there's a reluctance to use them because they're just an expense item. But if you think of them as part of a value proposition for your business and not think of it so much as an expense item, then I think you're better off. I handle complicated, significant legal disputes for businesses, and they're incredibly expensive. And if you can prevent getting involved in one of these situations by investing a little bit of time and money on trying to prevent these kinds of situations from occurring, you will save so much money. I mean, frequently,
especially since COVID,
of thousands of dollars.
It seems, especially since COVID, it seems like when people get into arguments that are legal, it's like 1 to 3 years or maybe even longer, and they just drag on and on. And the entrepreneur who loves to have control has no control over that process. It's just a runaway train that distracts the whole business and the entrepreneur and the emotional life of the business and the entrepreneur. And it can all be prevented with proper planning and structure.
It is leaving the fate of your business in the hands of people who don't know your business, who don't know you. They're just looking at it. They're looking at the facts, and they're instructed to apply the law the way a judge who doesn't know your business either instructs them to do. It's the ultimate loss of control, whether it's tried to a jury, to a judge, to arbitrators. It's third parties who don't know you or your business deciding the fate of your business. And we need to protect against that. And in that context, people learn from experience. So the people who have found themselves in these horror show bet your business cases that I've handled know from that experience. But I'm trying to encourage folks to not wait for that once in a lifetime horrible experience, but to try to prevent it. Prevention saves money. And so that's my
take on it.
unsolicited advice for the day.
I have a client that for the last over 2 years calls me every 2 weeks and says, well, I can't believe a judge could make a decision along these lines. What do you think? And I go, I'm not a judge, and I don't know who the judge is or what they will decide. They have a mind of their own, so I'm not going to answer you. Mark, if somebody wants
our system is designed to resolve disputes. I mean, hopefully the result is fair, but sometimes it's not fair.
Right.
I mean, look at all the people who were convicted of crimes, and as a result of DNA testing was determined that they didn't commit the crimes, and they spent all this time in jail. Now, we're talking about business disputes and not going to jail, but I do think that the principle is the same. Any dispute resolution system is imperfect because it's made up of people.
Right. And I can't always say how people will decide certain things. And Mark, it's all very helpful and I think good advice for entrepreneurs. If somebody's looking for you, could you please tell us how they could find you?
The best way would be to reach out to me by email. It's Furman, Furman, at TBHR-LAW.com.
And for our listeners who have been tracking Mark Furman for the last few years, you can find him every week and with Entrepreneurship and the Law on Radio Entrepreneurs.